Princess Samira's brother looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry, but Uncle promised I'd inherit if you were removed." But that betrayal was still 3 weeks away. Right now, bound and bleeding in a cave near Petra, Samira didn't know her own family would be the ones to destroy her. She only knew that the men holding her captive wore palace uniforms under their rebel disguises, and that meant someone close to the throne wanted her dead. The ransom kidnapping was fake. Her arranged marriage to the Saudi prince was a cover for oil deals that would destroy Jordan's Bedouin communities. And her mother's death 14 years ago? Not complications from childbirth, murder. Samira had 3 days to figure this out before they moved her to a second location. 3 days before she disappeared forever, another inconvenient princess silenced by tragic circumstances. She had rope burns on her wrists, sand in her mouth, and rage burning hotter than the desert sun. Then the shooting started. Cabello Maseko moved through the rebel camp like death itself, silent, efficient, unstoppable. 3 guards dropped before anyone could shout a warning. He was a former South African mercenary, now a private security contractor with a reputation built on impossible extractions and zero mercy. The Jordanian palace hired him with one instruction: retrieve Princess Samira, ask no questions, collect $2 million. He'd done worse jobs for less money. When he cut through the ropes binding Samira's wrists, she didn't cry with relief. She backed away from him, eyes fierce despite exhaustion bruising her face like storm clouds. He was massive, 6'4" of muscle and scars, with blood still wet on his tactical vest. She saw a man who killed without hesitation, another person who thought she was property to be moved from one cage to another. "Your father sent me," Cabello said in Arabic, his accent thick and unfamiliar. "We leave, now." "My father?" Samira laughed, bitter as poison. "My father would sell me before saving me. Who really hired you?" The question surprised him. Hostages didn't interrogate their rescuers. They usually sobbed with gratitude, clinging to their savior's arm. This princess looked ready to fight him. "Does it matter?" he asked. "It matters if you're taking me somewhere worse than here." Cabello checked his watch. The extraction helicopter would arrive in 40 minutes. "We can debate philosophy later, Your Highness. Right now, people are dying so you can walk out of here." "People you killed," she pointed out. "Would you prefer I ask them nicely?" Despite everything, Samira almost smiled. She stood on shaking legs and followed him into the pre-dawn darkness. They were halfway to the extraction point when Samira stopped walking, just stopped in the middle of the empty desert, with dawn breaking gold and merciless over the dunes. "I'm not going back," she said. Cabello turned slowly. "This isn't a negotiation, Princess. You'll have to carry me, drag me, tie me up like they did." Her voice was steady, certain. "Is that who you are?" He could. He'd carried uncooperative targets before, thrown them over his shoulder like luggage while they screamed and fought, but something about the way she stood there, exhausted and sunburned and absolutely unmovable, made him pause. She wasn't hysterical. She was making a calculated stand. "Those rebels were palace guards," Samira said, "my uncle's men. This whole kidnapping was staged so he can claim the throne while I'm traumatized and unmarriageable. If you take me back, I'm dead within a month. They'll call it an accident or suicide or desert bandits. But I'll be dead." "Not my problem," Cabello said automatically. "No, your problem is that half your payment comes on delivery. The other half only comes if I confirm you rescued me." Her smile was dangerous. "What do you think I'll tell them during the debrief?" She was threatening him. This princess, barefoot and bleeding, was threatening a mercenary who'd just killed 3 men to save her life. Cabello should have been angry. Instead, he was impressed. "You have no proof," he pointed out. "Just your word against the palace." "True, but I have something better. I know my uncle. I've watched him position himself as heir for 3 years, discrediting me at every turn. My arranged marriage was his final move to get me out of the way, and I'm willing to bet he's the one who hired you, not my father." Cabello said nothing, because she was right. The money came through channels that traced back to Prince Rashid, not the king. "If you take me back," Samira continued quietly, "you're not rescuing me. You're delivering me to my executioner. Can you live with that?" He'd lived with worse. 20 years of dirty contracts had taught him not to ask questions, never to take sides, and definitely not to care about the politics behind the paycheck. But then he remembered the photos. After every kill, Cabello checked their wallets. If they had pictures of children, wives, parents, he put them back carefully in their pockets. It was a small ritual, meaningless probably, but it helped him remember they were human, that they mattered to someone. The 3 guards he'd killed tonight all had photos. "If you're wrong about this," he said slowly, "we're both dead." "I'm not wrong." The helicopter appeared on the horizon, rotors cutting through morning silence. In 90 seconds, it would land. In 2 minutes, this would all be over, and he'd be $1 million richer. Cabello raised his rifle and shot out the helicopter's tail rotor with 3 precise rounds. The pilot barely escaped before the aircraft collapsed into expensive wreckage. Now they were both fugitives, a rogue mercenary and a runaway princess, stranded in the desert with palace forces hunting them. Samira stared at the burning helicopter, then at Cabello. "Why did you do that?" "Bad operational feeling," he muttered. "Liar." He was lying. The truth was more complicated. Something about the way she stood there, certain she was right even when she had nothing but intuition. Something about the photos in the dead guards' wallets. Something about the girl in Sudan he'd failed to save 12 years ago, who'd begged him not to take her home. He'd been wrong then. He'd delivered her anyway. 2 months later, she was dead. Honor killing. "We need to move," Cabello said instead of answering. "They'll send more teams." "Where are we going?" "Deeper into the desert. The Bedouin camps will hide us. After that," he shrugged, "we figure it out." "We?" Samira asked softly. "I just destroyed $1 million helicopter for you, princess. We're in this together now, whether I like it or not." She smiled, genuinely this time, not bitter or calculated, just relieved. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might still get us both killed." "Maybe," Samira agreed, "but at least it'll be our choice." They walked into the rising sun, 2 unlikely allies with nothing in common except enemies and a death sentence. Behind them, the helicopter burned. Ahead, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Neither knew they'd just taken the first step toward something neither believed possible. Trust, partnership, and eventually, against all logic and survival instinct, love. But that was still weeks away. Right now, they just needed to survive the next hour. They moved like ghosts through Jordan's wilderness, Wadi Rum's red canyons, the Dead Sea cliffs, finally the hidden passages of Petra that only locals knew. They were hunted by palace forces and real rebel groups who'd heard rumors of a rogue princess worth capturing. Cabello operated on mercenary instinct. Trust no one, plan 3 exits from every room, never sleep more than 4 hours. Samira operated on royal training, read people's loyalties, turn every interaction into useful information, command attention even in rags. They clashed constantly. She thought he was a blunt instrument who solved every problem with violence. He thought she was a privileged idealist playing at revolution. But they were learning each other. The way Cabello checked his weapons before dawn, counting ammunition with ritualistic precision. The way Samira prayed at sunset, kneeling toward Mecca even when exhausted. Small patterns, private rhythms, unspoken fears. They were becoming something more dangerous than allies. They were becoming a team. "Let me do the talking," Samira said as they approached the camp. "These are my mother's people." "Your people?" Cabello raised an eyebrow. "You've lived in palaces. They live in tents." "My mother was Bedouin before she married into royalty. I spent every summer here until I was 12. Her voice was sharp. "You know nothing about me. I know you've never had to beg for water." She proved him wrong. Within an hour, Samira had secured food, clean clothes, and information about patrol routes, not through money or threats, but through kinship ties and remembered stories. The Bedouin sheikh treated her as family, not as a princess. They spoke in rapid Arabic, laughing at shared memories, and Cabello watched from the shadows. He'd misjudged her. Again. That night, sharing a small tent, he caught her watching him clean his rifle. "What?" he asked. "You code switch," she said thoughtfully. "Soldier to civilian, killer to protector. Which one's real?" "Both? Neither." He reassembled the rifle without looking. "Does it matter?" "It matters if I need to know who I'm surviving with." Same person who shot down the helicopter. Same person who will get you out of this alive. You mean the person who's protecting me? She leaned forward. Or the person I'm protecting? Because we're keeping each other alive now, Cabello. This isn't rescue anymore. This is partnership. It was the first time she'd acknowledged they were equals, not captor and captive. The words settled between them like a promise neither had meant to make. 2 weeks into running, a sandstorm pinned them in a cave overlooking the Dead Sea. No fire, too visible, no movement. The storm would kill them. Just darkness, howling wind, and forced proximity. Hours passed in silence. Then Samira spoke. Why did you really shoot down the helicopter? Bad operational feeling, Cabello said automatically. Liar. You don't want the truth. Try me. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. 12 years ago, I extracted a girl from a militia camp in Sudan, 14 years old. She begged me not to take her back to her village, said her father sold her to the militia for drought relief. I didn't believe her. Samira waited. I delivered her anyway. 2 months later, I heard she'd been killed. Honor killing. He stared into the darkness. I remember all of them. All the ones I failed. Is that why you checked their wallets? Samira asked carefully. The men you kill? He turned sharply. How did you? I saw you after the rescue. You went through their pockets and put the photos back. I tell myself if they have children's photos, they were probably somebody's hero. Makes it harder to forget they were human. That's not mercy, Samira said softly. That's punishment. What's the difference? Mercy is for them. Punishment is for you. She shifted closer, not touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth in the cold cave. My mother died when I was 12. Officially, complications from childbirth with my younger brother. But I heard the palace doctors arguing afterward. They said she refused a blood transfusion that would have saved her. Something about religious principle. Did she? I don't know. That's what haunts me. Not knowing if she actually refused, or if my father's advisors refused for her because a Bedouin-born queen was becoming inconvenient. Her voice cracked slightly. I've spent 14 years wondering. That's why I ran. Not just the arranged marriage. I've been investigating my mother's death for 3 years. The more I discovered, the more dangerous I became to my uncle's plans. The kidnapping was just his final move. This isn't about rebellion, Cabello said slowly. It's about revenge. It's about truth. Maybe they're the same thing. For the first time, Cabello saw her not as a contract or complication, but as someone like him, someone carrying ghosts they couldn't save. 3 weeks in, they risked entering a small market town for medical supplies. Cabello had an infected knife wound from a skirmish 3 days prior. Samira insisted she could negotiate for antibiotics. The marketplace was crowded, loud, wonderfully normal. For a few minutes, they were just two people buying fruit, arguing about whether dates or figs were better. Samira laughed at something he said, an actual, unguarded laugh, and Cabello realized he'd memorized the sound. Then a palace patrol turned the corner. They ran, not like soldiers, but frantically, through fabric stalls, over produce carts, into narrow back streets. Cabello grabbed Samira's hand to pull her through a tight alley. When they finally stopped, pressed into a doorway and gasping, her hand was still in his. Did you see his face when I knocked over the chicken cages? Samira was breathless, exhilarated. You scream like a civilian, Cabello said, almost smiling. I am a civilian, you. She stopped because she realized how close they were. His hand holding hers, his body blocking her from the street, the way he was looking at her, not like a princess, not like a contract, like a woman he'd run through a marketplace with, whose laugh he'd memorized. A market woman opened the door behind them, scolding them in Arabic for blocking her entrance. They sprang apart, the moment shattering. But walking back toward Petra's ruins, their hands brushed 3 times. Neither pulled away. That night, making camp in a hidden tomb carved into rose-red stone, the silence between them wasn't hostile anymore. It was charged, dangerous. This is a bad idea, Cabello said quietly. What is? Whatever we're doing. We're surviving, Samira said. We're lying to ourselves. She didn't disagree, but she moved her bedroll 6 inches closer to his before she slept. They were no longer just allies. They were beginning to need each other, not for survival, but for something neither could name, something that felt like hope and trust, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, in the middle of all this chaos, they'd found something worth protecting beyond their own lives. They'd established a rhythm, a fragile partnership that felt almost sustainable. But Samira was pushing toward her goal, gathering evidence of her uncle's corruption to expose him publicly. She wanted journalists, human rights organizations, international pressure. Cabello argued it was too risky. Going public meant giving up their only advantage, invisibility. The real complication wasn't strategic. It was personal. They'd crossed the line from allies to something more. Both knew it. Neither admitted it. The emotional vulnerability terrified them more than physical danger. They were working by candlelight in an ancient Petra tomb, deciphering documents Samira had stolen from the palace before fleeing, ledgers showing arms deals, bribery, her mother's medical records with suspicious redactions. "Here," Samira said suddenly, finger tracing a line. "Look at this death certificate timestamp. She was declared dead 20 minutes before the surgery ended." Cabello leaned closer. "Someone decided ahead of time she wouldn't survive. My uncle signed the certificate." Her voice cracked, not dramatically, just a hairline fracture in her control. 14 years of wondering, and now she had proof her mother was murdered. Cabello did something he never did. He reached out, covered her hand with his. "We'll make him answer for it," he said quietly. "We?" She looked up at him, surprised. "I'm already a fugitive. Might as well be a fugitive with purpose." She kissed him, sudden, fierce, desperate, like she was drowning and he was air. He kissed back before his brain caught up, pulling her closer, tangling his hand in her hair, tasting salt and heat and need. Then he broke away. "No." He stood, putting distance between them. "This is... no." "Why?" Samira was still seated, stunned. "Because I'm a killer you hired to drag you back to prison, and you're a princess projecting safety onto the only person who hasn't tried to murder you in 6 weeks. This isn't real. Don't tell me what I feel." Her voice went dangerous. "You feel grateful, trauma-bonded. That's not the same as what? Love?" She stood now, angry. "I didn't say love. I kissed you because for 1 minute I wanted to feel something that wasn't fear or rage or grief. But fine. Forget it happened. Samira, we have work to do. Let's focus on that." She turned back to the documents, spine rigid. He stood there, still tasting her on his lips, hating himself. He genuinely believed she was confusing trauma with attraction. He'd spent 20 years avoiding emotional attachment because it got people killed. He was convinced anything between them was a survival mechanism, not real intimacy. But the kiss had shifted something, turned them from partners back into combatants, each nursing private wounds. A week later, Samira made contact with an Al Jazeera journalist without telling Cabello. She arranged a meeting in a safe house in Amman's outskirts, bringing documents as evidence. Cabello only discovered she was gone at dawn. She'd left a note. "Some risks are worth taking, trust me." He tracked her to the meeting point, arriving just as he realized the truth. The journalist was palace intelligence. 8 armed men surrounded the house. Cabello had 2 choices: abort and save himself, or attempt an extraction that would likely get them both killed. The smart play was to run. He had fake documents, cash, contacts in South Africa. He could disappear. Instead, he went in. The fight was brutal. Close quarters, overwhelming numbers. He took 3 bullets, 1 through his side, 2 caught by his vest, extracting her from the 2nd floor. They escaped through rooftops and alleyways, Samira half carrying him the last quarter mile to their fallback safe house. She stitched his side wound without anesthesia. They had nothing but vodka and a sewing kit. He bit down on leather, sweating through his shirt. When she finished, her hands were shaking. "You almost got us both killed," he said through gritted teeth. "I had to try. You lied to me, went behind my back, because you don't trust me." "I trust you with my life. I don't trust you with my mission." "What's the difference?" Cabello demanded. "Because you'd rather I stay hidden and safe," Samira exploded. "You don't actually want me to fight back. You want me to be a victim you can save. That's not protection, Cabello. That's control. I just took 3 bullets for you." I didn't ask you to. I didn't ask you to care whether I live or die. You said this wasn't personal, so stop making it personal. Silence. Then, quiet and dangerous. You want to know why I came for you? Why I didn't just run? Why? Because the thought of you in a cell or a grave or married off to some prince is a political tool. It made me want to burn the whole kingdom down. That's how personal this is. The confession hung between them like a knife. Cabello, she whispered. Forget it. We're done. I'll get you somewhere safe. An embassy, refugee organization. Then I'm gone. You're right. I can't do this. Can't do what? Care. His voice was raw. It gets people killed. It got my sister killed when I was 19 and tried to protect her from my stepfather instead of just getting her out. It got half my unit killed in Mozambique when I hesitated on a call because I was worried about civilians. Caring is something I can't afford, and you make me care so much I can't think straight. Then why did you come back for me? Tears streamed down her face. Because I'm a fool. He walked out, not out of the building, they were still hunted, but out of the room, slamming the door between them. Both had admitted they cared. Both were terrified of what that meant. Cabello's trauma response was to cut away emotionally before loss occurred. Samira's response was to fight for what she wanted, but she couldn't fight someone who was fighting himself. The relationship seemed impossible. He was ready to run, and she was realizing she couldn't do this alone, but refused to beg him to stay. They shared the safe house like hostile strangers, rotating watch shifts without speaking, eating separately, sleeping in different rooms. Cabello had contacted an Italian embassy official who could grant Samira asylum. Papers were being prepared. In 48 hours, she'd be safe, and he'd disappear into whatever hole he'd crawled out of. Then everything shattered. At midnight on the third day, someone knocked on their door. Samira opened it to find her younger brother Faisal, bloody, panicked, begging for protection. "Uncle tried to kill me," Faisal gasped, "when I started asking questions about where you went. Please, Samira, you're the only family I have left." Samira immediately moved to embrace him. Cabello drew his gun and stepped between them. "How did you find us?" His voice was ice, and with those 5 words, the final act began. Faisal was 19, the baby brother Samira hadn't seen since she fled. He stood in their doorway bleeding and terrified, claiming their uncle tried to assassinate him when he started asking questions about Samira's disappearance. Samira believed him immediately, her baby brother, the only family she had left. Cabello didn't. "How did you find us?" he demanded, gun still drawn. "I followed your patterns, Samira's old habits, the Bedouin camps, the western ruins." Faisal's voice shook. "Palace intelligence has been hunting us for 6 weeks, with satellites and informants," Cabello interrupted. "You found us in 3 days?" "Cabello, he's my brother," Samira said, stepping forward. "He's bait." "Samira, please." Faisal's eyes were desperate. "I have nowhere else to go. Uncle will kill me." "Lower the gun, now." Samira's voice went hard. "If I do, we're compromised. He is my brother." The room vibrated with tension. Finally, Cabello spoke carefully. "Ask him something only your brother would know, something private." Samira turned to Faisal. "What was Mother's last word before she died?" Faisal didn't hesitate. "Your name." She said Samira, and then she was gone. Samira's face crumbled. Cabello saw her believing, saw her moving toward her brother with open arms. Every instinct screamed trap. But he also saw what this moment meant to her, validation that she was loved, that her mother's last thought was of her. "He stays restrained," Cabello said, lowering his weapon. "Hands where I can see them. First sign of trouble, I put him down." "You point a gun at my family again," Samira said coldly, "and you and I are finished." "We're already finished, remember?" Faisal provided detailed intelligence, guard rotations, their uncle's schedule, the location of additional evidence in the palace's private archives. He had a plan, a way to sneak back into the palace during a state dinner, access the archives, and broadcast the evidence live during the event. It was brilliant, detailed, too perfect. At 2 a.m., Cabello pulled Samira aside while Faisal slept. "This is a setup. You're paranoid. I'm experienced. His story has no holes. Real refugees have inconsistencies, gaps in memory. He rehearsed this." Or he's telling the truth and you can't accept that I might have one person in this kingdom who actually loves me. I accept it. I just don't think he's that person. What do you want me to do? Samira's voice rose. Torture my own brother? For information? Abandon him like I was abandoned? Yes. Cabello's honesty was brutal. If it keeps you alive. That's the difference between us. You've forgotten how to be human. And you've forgotten that humans lie, especially to the people they're supposed to love. Against Cabello's protests, Samira agreed to Faisal's plan. Cabello insisted on coming. If it was a trap, he'd get her out. They infiltrated during the state dinner, dressed as catering staff. Faisal led them through servant corridors toward the archives. Everything went smoothly. Too smoothly. They reached the archive room. Faisal unlocked it with keys and codes that worked perfectly. Samira began downloading files onto encrypted drives. Cabello watched the doors, the hallways, the brother who wouldn't meet his eyes. Samira, we need to leave. Now. 5 more minutes. She's in position, Faisal said. Not to them, but to his concealed communication device. The doors locked. Sedative gas flooded the room. Palace guards poured in from hidden passages. Faisal stepped back, watching his sister realize what he'd done. I'm sorry, he said, genuinely sad. But Uncle promised I'd inherit if you were, removed. I can't spend my life as a spare, you understand? Faisal, Samira staggered, disbelieving. You're my brother. You abandoned the family. I'm just finishing what you started. Cabello, already holding his breath and fighting the gas, shot out the ventilation system and threw a smoke grenade. In the chaos, he grabbed Samira, who was in shock, barely fighting, broken, and carried her toward the emergency exit he'd scouted earlier. Because Cabello always scouted exits, even when everyone thought he was paranoid. They escaped through the palace sewers. When they surfaced 2 miles away in an industrial district, Samira was weeping, not dramatically, but with soul-deep grief. I'm sorry, Cabello said, holding her. You were right. You were right about everything. Her voice broke. I'm so stupid. You're not stupid, you're human. You wanted family. That's not weakness. It almost got us both killed. But it didn't. We're alive. You're alive. She pulled away from him, something dying in her eyes. Take me to the embassy. Tomorrow. I can't do this anymore. You were right. I should hide. Stay safe. Let other people fight. I'm not strong enough for this. Samira, please, just get me out. That's what you wanted anyway. So do it. She walked ahead of him through dark streets. Cabello realized that in saving her body, he'd lost her spirit. The woman who refused to return to the palace 5 weeks ago, who ran through marketplaces laughing, who kissed him like she was claiming life itself, that woman was gone. Her brother's betrayal killed something in her that bullets couldn't touch. And Cabello, who'd spent 6 weeks trying not to care, discovered that watching her give up was more painful than any wound he'd ever taken. They were 12 hours from the embassy. Samira was silent, numb, going through motions. Cabello had secured documents, cash, a new identity for her. She'd be safe in Italy. Eventually asylum in the EU, maybe a quiet teaching position somewhere. She'd survive, but she wouldn't live. He watched her prepare to disappear, burning papers, cutting her hair short, practicing her new name. Every action was a small death. The woman who wanted to expose corruption and honor her mother's memory was becoming someone who just wanted to be invisible. And something in Cabello, the part he thought he'd killed years ago, couldn't let that happen. Because he'd spent 20 years surviving. But survival wasn't the same as living. And this woman, this impossible princess who ran into danger like it was redemption, had reminded him what living meant. She'd reminded him what it felt like to care about someone more than he cared about his own survival. She'd reminded him that some things were worth fighting for, even when fighting seemed impossible. So at dawn, 12 hours before she disappeared forever, Cabello made a choice. Not the safe choice, not the smart choice, the right choice. Cabello found her on the roof watching sunrise over Amman, the city she'd never returned to. I was wrong, he said. Samira didn't look at him. About what? When I said you were confusing trauma with attraction, when I said you should hide, when I said caring gets people killed. He sat beside her. I spent 20 years believing that staying emotionally empty kept me alive. But you know what I've realized? I haven't been alive. I've been surviving. There's a difference. Survival is enough, she said quietly. It's not. Not for you. My own brother betrayed me. My uncle murdered my mother. My father either knows or doesn't care. There's no one left to fight for. Fight for her. Cabello pointed to the city below, to the desert beyond. The girl who spent summers with Bedouins, the woman who memorized her mother's stories, the princess who ran rather than submit. She's worth fighting for. I don't know if she exists anymore. She does. I've seen her. His voice was steady. She runs through marketplaces laughing. She stitches bullet wounds without flinching. She kisses like she's grabbing life with both hands. You think your brother destroyed you? He didn't. He just proved what you suspected all along. The palace corrupts everything it touches. But you're not palace anymore. You're free. So what are you going to do with that freedom? I'm tired, Cabello. I know, but you don't get to quit. Because I've spent 6 weeks watching you be braver than anyone I've ever met, and I'll be damned if I help you disappear when you were meant to burn this whole corrupt system to the ground. Back inside, Samira sat with the documents they'd escaped with, incomplete evidence but still damning. Cabello made coffee, gave her space. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, not broken, forged. If I do this, if we do this, it's not a rescue mission anymore. It's a revolution, a small one, but still. People will die. Probably us. Probably, Cabello agreed. Why would you stay? You don't owe me anything. You could still disappear. He sat across from her. You asked me once why I checked the wallets. It's because I need to remember they were human, that every person I killed mattered to someone. But here's what I never told you. I also check because I'm looking for the one that has my sister's photo, the person who killed her after I failed to protect her. Did you find them? No, but I found you, and you're trying to do what I couldn't. Stop the people who kill innocents and call it politics. Maybe I can't save my sister, but I can help you save others. Samira reached across the table, taking his hand. This isn't penance, Cabello. If you stay, it has to be a choice. It is a choice. He squeezed her hand. You asked me weeks ago if I knew who you really were. I do now. You're the woman I'd follow into hell because you're the only person I've met who thinks it's possible to come back out. That's who you are. And you're the man who took 3 bullets for someone else's mission and still thinks he doesn't know how to care. She leaned forward. That's who you are. She kissed him again. Not desperate this time, sure. He kissed back without pulling away, without second-guessing. When they broke apart, "Is this still trauma bonding?" she asked. "If it is, I don't care anymore." Good answer. 3 days later, they stood in the ruins of Petra where this began. They'd made a plan, not to hide, but to fight strategically. Using Cabello's underworld contacts and Samira's remaining evidence, they'd build a case and leak it through multiple international channels simultaneously, too distributed to suppress. It would take months. It was dangerous. They'd live as fugitives, constantly moving, always hunted, but they'd do it together. Samira wore Bedouin clothes now, her princess life completely shed. She looked different, not harder, but clearer, like someone who'd found their purpose. We might fail, she said. We might. My uncle might win. The palace might bury everything. It's possible. But we'll try anyway. Yes? She took his hand. I need you to promise me something. What? If I don't make it, if this kills me, you don't get to spend another 15 years looking for someone to blame. You finish what we started, and then you live. Actually live. Promise me. Cabello pulled her close. I'll promise if you promise the same. Deal. They kissed in the ruins, 2 fugitives building something fragile and fierce from the wreckage of their lives. The evidence leaked, international pressure mounted. Samira's uncle was arrested amid scandal. Her father abdicated, his involvement exposed. The arranged marriage was dissolved. Samira didn't return to claim the throne. She gave up her title completely. Instead, she and Cabello ran a network helping women escape forced marriages and political persecution across the Middle East. They operated from the shadows, funded by Cabello's mercenary savings and Samira's liquidated palace assets. They lived in a small house outside Petra, in the desert she loved. He taught self-defense to refugees. She documented human rights violations for international courts. They weren't married, neither believed in institutions anymore, but they wore matching Bedouin silver bands on their right hands. On quiet nights, they sat on their roof and watched stars over the desert. He told her about his sister, memories he'd never shared with anyone. She read him her mother's favorite poetry in Arabic, teaching him the language properly. They weren't healed. Trauma doesn't work like that. But they were healing each other, day by day, choice by choice. "Do you ever regret it?" Samira asked one evening. "Shooting down that helicopter?" "Every time someone shoots at us," he paused, "and never when you laugh. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "Don't get used to it," she smiled. "Too late."